Man, it's hard to believe that I'm still doing this show. Got started back in 2015, but I can't stop because there's so many interesting people in the world that I want to get to know better. And this is a great excuse to reach back out to someone I hadn't talked to in a while, which is actually today's guest. So without further delay, let me introduce today's guest. Today's guest is known as the Rapid Growth Guy. With a track record of overseeing 5 multi-million-dollar business success stories by the age of 30, he's earned accolades such as being named a top 30 sales professional by Global Gurus and being recognized as the 2023 Sales Kickoff Speaker of the Year by Selling Power Magazine. He's also the founder of introvertu.com and the best-selling author of the Introvert's Edge book series, which includes titles like The Introvert's Edge to Networking, Work the Room, Leverage Social Media, Develop Powerful Connections. His books have sold over 100,000 copies and been translated into 15 languages. In addition to his literary success, he is the charismatic host of the Introvert's Edge podcast and the Better Business Coach podcast, where he shares invaluable insights and strategies for business success. His expertise and insights have transformed thousands of struggling or plateaued small businesses, propelling them into momentum and growth. From working with major companies like Electrolux, Oracle, and Microsoft to launching the Small Business Festival, ranked as a top 3 business conference by Inc., he is committed to sharing his rapid growth system with entrepreneurs and business owners worldwide. Please join me in welcoming Matthew Pollard. Welcome, Matthew.
Mate, I'm ecstatic to be here. Thanks so much for having me on.
And where in the world are you right now? Are you over in North Carolina?
I actually am. Yeah, I'm finally home for almost a week and a half before I head out to Grand Rapids and then all the way to Australia and then back to Nashville.
I never know where I'm going to find you when you and I connect. And it has been years since we connected. We just said it's been nearly a pandemic, or maybe more than a pandemic's worth of time. As you know, this is a show about building strong connections, and the context is leadership. So tell me, how do you define leadership, and when did you realize you had the skills to lead?
Well, I was forced to lead, and it was not my my dream, let me put it that way. But I think what defines leadership is a willingness to ruck in with everybody else. I think so many people think leadership means you just tell people what to do, and I tend to find that the best way to lead is to be willing to do every job that everyone on your team does, have a willingness to actually understand those jobs, and then be willing to dig down and actually help if you need to. I think so many people believe too much in the hierarchy, and I feel that hierarchies are overrated, if not old school, and just should be completely dissolved. Now, I understand in larger organizations, sometimes you do have to have hierarchy, but I just feel that it is in a lot of places unnecessary, especially with small teams with inside global organizations and especially small businesses. I fell into to leadership when, and I mean, we can go into this if you like, but I fell into sales, learned to sell watching YouTube videos, and within 6 weeks became the #1 salesperson, the largest sales and marketing company in the Southern Hemisphere. But I mean, more importantly, I went from scared to sell to teaching people how to do it, but not by choice. What happened was I won the award for the #1 salesperson. They went, "Oh, wow, you're amazing. You can sell. I mean, you can manage too." I don't know why people think that. Like, I had no idea how to manage at all. I got thrown into leadership, and they just said, "Oh, we'll just give you 20 people, mud up against the wall, see if anyone sticks." Everyone quit within 24 hours. So for me, I actually went back and watched YouTube videos again to learn how to manage. And I think, all my work on, introversion and the strategies that introverts need to succeed. I mean, truthfully, a strategy applies to everybody. The fact is everything is a learnable skill. The difference for introverts is that we often believe that we can't learn to do these so-called extroverted arenas, which I actually believe introverts have the edge in, like networking, sales, leadership. The fact of the matter is, though, every single skill set, and for those extroverts, active listening and empathy might be on that list for you, tend to be very, very learnable skills. They just require effort, systems, strategies, process, and practice.
Trying to imagine you being thrown into that role.
It was terrifying, mate. I was 19.
Does not sound good. And I agree with you when you were talking about hierarchies and getting into it with your team. I actually had a flashback. I was a manager of a Taco Bell when I was in college for a little bit, and there was another shift manager who everyone was friends with, but he would spend his entire shift smoking weed in the manager's office and not really helping out at all. And I would spend my entire shift, and I wasn't close friends with these people. I would spend my entire shift working. Anything I asked them to do, I would do. And I'd rotate them, make sure they got breaks, took care of them, checked in with them. And in the end, like, I earned a lot of respect. Like, that's the difference, right? That he might have been their friend, but they were a little bummed about when he was on shift because he didn't really take care of them. So that was the memory you brought me back to my days being a shift manager when I was trying to find time waiting tables, but I had to kill some time at a fast food joint. I want to know more about who you were as a kid, because before all of this YouTube learning happened, how'd you show up on the playground? What were you like in primary school? Did you sort of sit back? Did teachers notice that you had the ability to take action? Did you run for student office or active in clubs, like, and activities? What kind of kid were you?
Yeah, interesting question. So, I mean, my whole childhood, I kind of felt like the slow kid. Actually, I have these on my desk. See, I got diagnosed with this thing called Irlen syndrome in late high school, which basically means I put on this pair of funny colored lenses and miraculously I can learn to read. Not like everyone else, but I could start the process. But, truthfully, up until the age of about 16, when I was diagnosed, I mean, I was known as the slow kid that wouldn't apply himself. And people, the lucky thing was my parents wouldn't believe that because they saw how hard that I worked, and they found these glasses that actually led. I mean, I hustled the last 2 years of high school, but I got into the top 20% of my state. But you're talking about a guy, in a lot of my presentations, I talk about, either storytelling or rapid growth. And, you get about halfway through on this and everybody's kind of looking at me like, oh, this guy's got this natural ability. He's just lucky to be who he is. And I feel like what happens is anybody that's successful, we kind of project extroversion upon, and people don't really see people as they get started. So I think, Robbie, it's a really important question because, for me, I mean, I had no idea what I wanted to do. I always felt like the slow kid. If, the photo that I put up to kind of bring myself down a peg to bring everyone back up with me is me with this really bad acne and at my sister's wedding. And I talk about that. I mean, that's who I was. And then throw these glasses on and braces at that age. And that's who I am. As you can imagine, the glasses didn't exactly make me feel confident. The acne definitely didn't. And the braces, well, that's a small period. And luckily enough, so was the acne. But, I just always felt slow and kind of uncomfortable. And so falling into sales, I mean, my gosh, absolutely not expected. I mean, I took a job at a day the goal was to take a year off to find myself. Maybe some people listening have had parents that have had kids that were doing the same. But for me, I worked for about 3 weeks and my manager pulls me aside. This was a real estate agency. And don't worry, I wasn't the guy out selling. I was the guy in the back office doing data entry, like literally with a face that said, don't speak to me. I'm here to find myself. And, my manager pulls me aside. He's like, Matt, I'm so sorry you're out of work. Like, they just decided to close down this office. Like, this was Australia at Christmas time, right? Like, we go on holidays. It's summer at Christmas time. We go on holidays on the 20th of December. We don't come back till the 15th or 20th of January. So the only jobs that were available were these things called commission-only sales roles. There were 3 of them. The only thing more terrifying than applying for all 3 of those were going home and telling my father, who broke his back 80 hours a week, I'm out of work and I've got nothing lined up. So I applied for all 3, and then I got 3 job interviews, and then I got 3 job offers. And I'm like, wow, maybe they see something in me I don't see in myself. So I took a job doing business to business telecommunications, and my trainer, on the very first day I walked in with this little bit of quiet confidence, I got 3 job offers. How could they not see something in me? He's like, Matt, we just hire everyone. We've got this saying, we just throw mud up against the wall, we see what sticks. Like, I still remember after 5 days product training and not a single second of sales training, I get thrown on this road called Sydney Road in Melbourne, Australia, and literally get told to go sell. I didn't even know what to say. Like, my first door, I literally walked in, stumbled through it. He told me to leave politely, luckily, because the next door swore at me. The door after that told me to go get a real job. And door after door, that just kept happening until I made my first sale on the 93rd door. So, I mean, I definitely wasn't that person that had that natural ability. And I think I've always been an inward thinker. I always overcomplicated things. And it was only through systems and process that allowed me to succeed. But by the way, and I want to clarify, this is not just me and that I'm lucky to achieve this. Like, if you think about people like, everyone knows that introverts can't sell, but Zig Ziglar is also an introvert, might be the most also well-known sales trainer that ever lived. We all know that introverts can't network, except for the fact that Ivan Misner, the founder of BNI, the world's largest networking group in the world, is an introvert. And by the way, if you don't believe me, go on Google Ivan Misner introvert, and he's got a blog that he wrote called OMG, I'm an Introvert, because he didn't realize until his wife told him, and he had to go do a test to confirm. And then if you think we can't do small talk, well, Oprah Winfrey and David Letterman are introverts. I mean, Ellen DeGeneres is an introvert. Like, there's so many introverts in our world that have obtained success. And it's not just introverts that are killing it in the tech sector. There are introverts like Brian Smith, the founder of billion-dollar brand UGG Boots, the big sheepskin boot company out of Australia that made massive, like huge success in the United States. There are what I call secret introverted titans everywhere. And that's why I had the Introvert's Edge podcast, because I feel somebody needs to create a dialogue to confront this stigma, because it's rubbish that we can't succeed.
I have so much to unpack here. First of all, the fact that you are who you are today and you have where you started, the foundation you started from, I think gives you incredible empathy. We are now, the conversation for me has shifted in the last 5 years. It used to be all I did was talk about introversion, extroversion. I am an outgoing extrovert. I see that as a privilege, being an extrovert, because it takes less energy for me to be out and about, and being out and about helps people grow their business and be connecting the world. I actually did one of my earliest podcast episodes. I was doing solo shows. Episode 32 is actually called Expert Privilege. And but I think that now the conversation has shifted a little bit more to neurodiversity. So you sharing this piece about this learning disability you had that was sort of undiagnosed for such a long time. I mean, to be a teenager, to be 16, when you finally realize there is a possible way forward, and for you to hustle and work hard and then realize you can learn. I mean, that must give you a lot of insights into how it is possible for that. Like you said, that rapid growth, that you had that first taste of that. You just knew that you didn't have all the tools and resources you needed up until that point, but you had parents who believed in you and you believed in you. And so I think that's the piece that a lot of people don't have. They don't have people who believe in them. They don't believe in themselves, and they don't see, like you just listed, all the icons of the world of business and networking who are identified in some way as introverts. So I think it's helpful for people to know that's out there. I want to mention two more actually. One is Dorie Clark. So Dorie Clark is a massive success as a international speaker, as a business. She teaches business school, and she doesn't have a business degree. She is a prolific author. She's an amazing business coach, right? She does all these different things. And when she moved to New York City, she knew she needed to build a local community, but wasn't going to go out 5 nights a week. So she started hosting dinners twice a month. And so episode 31, one of my earliest episodes, was my dear friend Dorie Clark. And one other that gets talked about a lot, I don't know if you know her, but Maura Aarons-Mele is someone else who speaks a lot about introversion. And her book and her podcast is called Hiding in the Bathroom. And she was telling me that she's really sensitive to the overhead lights in offices. So she early on left that space and started working from home. Now I would see that she may qualify as highly sensitive. So now we have language for HSPs. So all this has evolved tremendously in the last decade or so, where there's language for these nuances. And of course, there's like overlapping Venn diagrams. Like you could be HSP and an extrovert, or you could HSP and an introvert. Like all this stuff can be kind of overlapping. So I will put all those links to those shows in the show notes. Before we dig into more about how you got your start in business, though, I want to know what you thought you were going to be when you were 12. Like, what was the dream? Was there a given you were going to go to college? Was there a family business that you were going to get into? Like, what was sort of the vision?
Not at all. I mean, well, it's so funny that you highlight all this. So firstly, I mean, Dorie Clark's work is absolutely amazing. And, she was actually on one of my original guests for the Introvert's Edge podcast. And the way she kind of navigates things is amazing. And I will say, I often say that the adversities we face seed the success of our future. And I do believe that at all ages, a lot of times people dismiss their shortcomings. They dismiss their issues. They try to hide like they're not there. And I think that we're finally starting to get to the point where people can be open and honest about it. I do feel that there are certain industries that are a little bit slower to adapt. Like I've spoke at the AAISP Leadership Summit. And I just asked the question, are you introverted or extroverted? For all the leaders, these are the senior leaders in most of the largest tech companies and the largest, airline companies and, medical companies in the world. And some of the responses, my gosh, they were horrifying. It was like, oh, I was introverted, but don't worry, I'm not anymore. Or, oh, I'm a recovering introvert. I'm like, what What do you mean? Like, there's nothing wrong with being an extrovert. There's nothing wrong with being an introvert. People just don't understand. And if the organization thinks that way, why would you ever feel open to sharing? Because people are automatically going to see it as a disadvantage. So I would hide it if I worked for one of those organizations, right? So you have to be willing to create an open dialogue. Now, I do actually have big lights on me right now. Most people would say, because I do struggle with them, it does draw my energy. But the truth is that it's got nothing to do with that. It's that there's a yellow pigment inside white light. With my eye condition, it really drains my energy. I'm not highly sensitive. Then there are extroverts that are shy. My goodness. Can you imagine that? You can't help but talk, but then you feel anxious and worried about talking. There are so many burdens that everybody has to bear. And what I've learned is that actually, we go back to the leadership statement you made before. I feel that the best thing a leader can do when somebody gives an excuse or a reason for why they can't achieve something, like I'm an introvert, or I'm highly sensitive, or I just, that doesn't come naturally to me, or that people aren't willing to pay our price tag in this market. The best question you can ask is, when did you decide that? Because the truth is, usually it's a whole bunch of fake reasons or fake stories that you create yourself. And a lot of times, I talk about storytelling and how it short circuits the logical mind. You speak directly to the emotional mind. And a lot of times we literally tell ourselves these stories that stop our logical mind even looking for a solution. It's terrifying. So you're 100% right on the fact that this is a mess. And I agree with the fact that we're doing a lot more to talk about that now, because let's face it, like, if we go back 100 years, there are a lot more important matters to figure out. Now, there still is in a lot of ways, but at least we're having these really important dialogues, and information is so much more plentiful. There was no information when I was 12. And truthfully, I had no idea how or what I was going to achieve. I didn't actually have a clue what I wanted to do, but my parents always told me to aspire. And actually, funny story, and I'm going to go back. I don't think it was 12. I think it was closer to 9. One of my teachers asked me what I wanted to be, and I told them that I wanted to be an attorney. My parents both got called in to talk to the teacher, because me wanting to be a lawyer was me setting false expectations of my ability and my skills, given where I stood in life, and told me that I should probably accept the fact that I was probably going to do something kind of like a police officer or something like that would be something for me to, if I really reached, I would be able to achieve. Can you imagine telling that to a 9-year-old? Like, how is that even okay? So I feel that I'd like to think these days that we're getting much better. And don't get me wrong, there's also delusionary focus, because, the concept of The Secret, I mean, don't get me wrong, I love saying that I can do anything, right? I believe that I can do everything, but not without a lot of effort and work. Mm-hmm. And so for me, I felt that if I said I wanted to be a doctor or a lawyer, my teacher should have sat me down and said, here is the work required. Here's what we need to do. Are you willing to do that? I would have said, hell no, because it wasn't that important to me.
I have an 8-year-old who told me he wanted to be a professional basketball player. And I said, well, you probably should start playing now. He said, no, I'm going to start playing in high school. I was like, you can't start playing in high school. It doesn't work that way. You gotta at least be in the driveway, like shooting. Like I agree with you. Like you have to kind of help people see the path sometimes.
Well, I mean, that's a perfect example, though. I mean, how many people, they're like, oh, you're under 6 foot, you're not going to be a basketball player. How many titans of basketball are there that are short, but people just expect them not to be able to achieve success?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, work harder. So it sounds like a lot of your life was really shaped early on by you feeling kind of held back by, the reading is such an important part of childhood, being able to comprehend, follow along in class, all of that. And so you didn't have that. You were at that disadvantage until you were 16. And then it sounds like you worked really hard the last couple of years of school. Did you then go off to university?
What's really interesting, actually, and I want to confront the concept of I was held back, because, again, I don't think I was. And yes, according to the way that most people view the world, I was definitely held back. I couldn't read. Sure, I'll give you that. But here's what was really interesting. Because I couldn't read, I had to be far cleverer about how I coped. So what would happen is I hadn't read the textbooks in school. And I knew that most movies that are, around the books that you'd read around English class, for instance, I knew for a fact that the movies didn't cover everything. So what I would do is I would stimulate quite aggressive class discussions about the topic matter of the book so I could fill in the gaps before the test. So I became very, very good at getting information out of people that I needed to survive, which definitely helped me in sales and networking. On top of that, what I became, and I think this is one of my innate skills, and I'm not sure if it's something I would have had without these disabilities. I learned to synthesize information better than I know. Like, I can do far more with far less information than anyone else. And I can see things that most people can't see. And now I have the ability to consume, like, I listen to 3 audiobooks a week. I consume so much information. I coach all these clients that give me all this raw data. That synthesis ability by far runs circles around everybody else's natural ability to consume information that they don't utilize. Like those people that say, oh, I read 100 books this year. I'm like, great. How many did you actually apply? And how much do you remember? Right. So the thing that I'm really focused on is using the information and synthesizing the data points to create new and fresh ideas. But to answer your question about, did I go off to university? Well, no, I actually went straight into, well, I did that real estate job. I then fell into commission only sales. I got promoted 7 times in the space of 12 months after I went back to YouTube to learn how to manage. And then I started my own business. And then fast forward just shy of a decade, I was responsible for 5 multi-million-dollar success stories. My last business, though, was an education facility. And my whole brand's built on authenticity, especially for introverts. They need to believe in the person that they're talking to. And when I went back and did education, I felt disingenuous selling education given the fact that I didn't have one. So I actually went back and did my MBA. But what most people are blown away with, and this is all, again, this is about when the world doesn't work for you, you find shortcuts, you find ways to do things. So I discovered that there were MBAs, executive MBAs, that you could get into without even doing an undergrad. And a lot of Americans, whenever I say that, even my wife said this, there's no way you can do that in America. Well, you can do it at the University of Texas. It's just not advertised as much. But if you've got 8 years senior leadership, you can get into an MBA, no problem. Now, here's the thing. I don't know if I would have done well in an undergraduate. I don't even know if I would have survived it, because I think undergraduates, from what I've heard and from a lot of my friends, it's about proving that you can learn and churning through lots and lots of jargon and proving that you can remember it. And yes, it does allow you to show some thought, but it's more about sharing your thoughts about what other people said. I think an MBA is more about synthesis of information and showing that you can have original thought and ideas around the concepts, and you can apply it in unique situations with what you're doing at work. And so I actually, thrived in the MBA. I don't think I would have done very well in an undergraduate at all. I ended up coaching 2 of my executive MBA teachers at the end of it, because, when I looked at marketing, I was looking at scatter plots and all the things that they do. And I'm like, this doesn't actually work in the real world. And so the truth is, it does if you've got $1 billion company. But for those $100 million companies, $50 million companies, and micro businesses, well, the truth is it doesn't work at all a lot of the time. And the fact that marketing people don't talk to salespeople and salespeople don't talk to marketing people because they hate each other is ridiculous. So I actually, again, learned to become one of those people that was actually able to translate. Well, I can have the sales and marketing arguments in my own head. So again, it gave me the ability to excel purely because of the adversities that I faced.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I'm curious how you ended up on YouTube to learn the initial sales and then the management skills. Like, how did that, was that already a resource for you? Was YouTube someplace you were already going?
Desperation is probably the right word, Robbie.
Yeah.
I mean, I hit 93 doors to make my first sale. And don't get me wrong, I was ecstatic for like 45 seconds until I had my realization, I got to do this again tomorrow. And you're saying you worked in fast food. I worked at McDonald's from 14 and 9 months right through till my first job in telecommunications, door-to-door sales, was commission only. I was still working at McDonald's, working 20 hours a week because I didn't get paid for a month and a half, right? So for me, 93 doors to make $70. It was still an okay day's work, but gosh, I didn't want to do it tomorrow, the next day. So actually, I think this is a defining principle. I feel like a lot of people say, well, I'm just going to hustle through in sales. I didn't want to have every day be like that. Rely on lady luck, 45 doors the next day, 255 the next, like horrible. But I also wasn't willing to give up because, the whole world never worked for me. Like, this was no different. I had to find a path. And I feel like that relentless pursuit of a way is something most people just don't have, because a lot of times things come easy to them. And then they hit this first barrier and they're like, well, I can't do it. Well, when did you decide that? When did you try? Have you dedicated enough time to try? So for me, I felt like it was firstly my willingness to take responsibility at that point that brought this. Then my willingness to say, what if? Like Henry Ford said, if you think you can or if you think you can't, you're right. Well, I chose to believe there was a way. And so I said, well, if there was a way, what would it be? As opposed to how am I going to survive? If there was a way, what would it be? And I said, well, maybe sales is a system, because without a system, I was going to be, have a really tough year. So I said, okay, let's assume that it's a system. Then I could have easily said, well, I can't read. So it would have taken me a year to read a Brian Tracy or a Zig Ziglar book. So no chance there. But instead I said, okay, is there a way? And it was about that time YouTube was actually coming out in Australia. Like, our internet supply came a little bit later. We were on dial-up, or, we just started to get to some decent speeds. And it was about that time that I gravitated to YouTube, right? So YouTube was really becoming a thing, but, it was in my zone of knowledge that YouTube existed, but I thought it was just a bunch of comical cat videos at that time. And so for me, I went, well, I wonder if, and I remember just typing in sales system and all these videos came up. And then every day, and by the way, I'm not suggesting this to anyone because it's probably going to sound like torture, but every day I would spend 8 hours practicing the next step or perfecting the step that I was working on. And then I would go out and I'd apply that the next day for 8 hours. Then I'd rush home and spend 8 hours practicing. Weekends, I'd spend 16 hours practicing. And I did that every single day.
How old were you at this time?
I'm just trying to think. I would have been just about to turn 19. So very close to my 19th birthday.
All right. I can't imagine. Like, there's so much about what you just said that sounds very much like a you thing, because the dedication that you had as a 19-year-old, like, that's to be really applauded. Clearly, you had more sort of muscle built up around overcoming adversity, finding a way through, being resilient. I mean, I think resilience is something we earn. A lot of people who haven't faced as much adversity, like you said, the first barrier put in front of them, they're like, I can't do this. Whereas other people have had just, over, under, or through. Like, that's the choice here. And I'll figure this out. But to be 19 and willing to put that much time and effort into getting good at a job that no one particularly loves. I mean, I guess there's some people in the world who love door-to-door sales, but come on. I've done door-to-door fundraising. I've done door-to-door political awareness knocking, for campaigns. Like, it's just a hot, cold, need a bathroom, too thirsty. Like, there's extremes. The entire experience is about extremes.
Yeah.
So it's a hard thing to do. And so for you to want to get better and for you to say, I'm going to find some stuff. I love that you thought of, that YouTube came to where you were in the globe and you were able to access that. I mean, it just says a lot about who you were then, and also makes sense for why you're able to take all the information you have now and synthesize it down to something that other people can follow. That you're a systems thinker, that you take all the information you've been learning all these years and you apply it in a way that helps other people. When I was connecting to you years ago, you were working on a book and then you subsequently came out with another book. What led you to write those books? Like, what was the sort of decision around branding that and just like deciding what was going to be part of the focus for that?
Yeah, so I appreciate you asking. And truthfully, if I didn't write the first book, it would have been embarrassing because I kept saying somebody had to write a book on introverted selling, i.e. not me, somebody should. And everybody's response was, no one's going to buy a book on introverted selling, Matt. I mean, truthfully, it's just there's not a market for that. I'm like, you're kidding, right? This is like 50% almost of the world economy of people. And you're saying no one's going to buy the book when there are 2,000 books for what are perceived extroverted. Funnily enough, most of the books are written by introverts, funnily enough. But but the truth is that I was like, this is an entire marketplace. How? And so I knew that book needed to exist. And to be honest with you, I mean, it's why I founded National Introverts Week, to confront the stigma around introversion. And introverts aren't second-class citizens. Our path to success is just different, the way I believe it. And truthfully, I believe introverts, extroverts, shy people with highly sensitive issues, people that don't have any of those issues, we all have our burdens to bear, right? So for me, I think the biggest issue for introverts was the belief. So, in the first book on selling, I literally said, there is nothing you're going to learn in this book that you could not learn from other books. All I have done is put it in a methodical process free of bulldogs, techniques, and hard closes, and introduce stories of other introverts, some with chronic stutters, that have actually learned the strategies to obtain success. And I think that willingness to be totally honest about the fact that introverts these are all the stories, and every single story in that book is 100% real, 100% a real person. And I felt like he needed that for introverts. But the truth is, I couldn't have done it without a ghostwriter to assist me. And Derek Lewis, he was actually a ghostwriter that believed that nobody could afford $20,000 for a ghostwritten book, even though the industry standard is $40,000. And literally the answer only came out from me asking, when did you decide that? Understanding that it had nothing to do with 20,000, but the way he was selling it. And he was trying to sell it completely via email because he hated picking up the phone. I mean, people hate writing. That's why they're hiring a ghostwriter. So for me, like changing his sales process, I mean, he went from struggling to make, I think he made 27,000 in 2013, 12,000 in 2014 in October when he reached out. He made 40,000 in 2 weeks, 80,000 in 6 weeks, 120 by the end of the year. By the following year, we put his price up to 50,000. He made 300,000. He now charges 130,000 for a ghostwritten book, and he's booked out to way into next year. So again, a lot of people just create excuses. And Derek's like, you've got to put these strategies into a book. And I was terrified of doing this. And, you know, for me, even working with a ghostwriter, I still had to read every chapter with Zara and I became great friends, the robot voice, right? So I'd listen to every chapter, 3,500, 5,000 words, right? 3,500 to 5,000 words of comments. Every chapter I did that. Then he sent me the 50,000 word manuscript. I wrote 35,000 words of notes, and on we went, right? So it's a lot of work. The reason why I wrote the second one is because it was actually a guy out of Buffalo, New York, who sent me a message about his son who picked up The Introvert's Edge to Sales, that one, and he read the book and made a decision that this was, we did a video interview with this guy. It still breaks me up, but he was, 16. You're talking a guy that wore a hoodie, never really made eye contact, stared at his shoes. And he read my book on The Introvert's Edge to Sales and decided that if I could learn to make sales a system, that he could make a system out of making friends. And I mean, the book's not about that. Yet he decided that. He carried my book around at class. If you can imagine, I can't imagine doing that. And he systemized making friends with people. And to the point where the hoodie 2 months later was gone. He started making eye contact. There's, now there's a girl in the picture. He's, he loves his life. And he did it all by just understanding that if he could synthesize the information about sales to friendship. And what I realized is that I wrote The Introvert's Edge to help people close deals for, and find, clients, I guess, but from cold calling. But I realized that when I moved to America, I hated the elevator pitch. Like I felt like it was transactional. I felt like it was tacky. It just didn't work. And it was so eye-centric. And that's why most people hate it. So they do this, like those transactional networks. Do you want to buy from me? No. What about you? What about, hate that. But most people reside to what I call aimless networking, where they're like, well, my day job is, who wants to talk to someone like that? And so I realized there needed to be a new process. And in truth, because for the first time I was selling myself, not a product or service that I offered, I had to think of a new strategy. So the Introvert's Edge networking is a totally new strategy that I feel brings authenticity back into the networking process. It talks, when you introduce what you do, you talk from a place of passion and mission, what you love to see, what you hate to see, not, I do this for this group of people, even if they have this, yuck. So for me, I decided based on this young boy out of Buffalo and whose name was Joel, and the fact that I developed this new networking process, that there are so many, and look, don't get me wrong, this book works amazingly well for people in corporations as well. But truthfully, there are so many people. I believe there's something heroic about a person with enough talent, skill, and belief in themselves to start a business of their own. But what I find is most people, especially in highly complex fields, especially introverts, they end up in this constant hamster wheel of struggling to find interested people, trying to set themselves apart, trying to make the sale, fighting on price, feeling like they even don't like what they do anymore because they feel shortchanged by everybody and taken advantage by them. And truthfully, they live off their Rolodex and referrals and repeat business, and they're just surviving. And it's because they hide away from networking. And truthfully, you don't need to be great at networking, or you don't need to network forever. Once you refine the message and you can get clear in the networking room, you don't have to be the loudest. And then you can go online and not take photos of your dog and donut for something to say. You can be the clearest online and break through the noise. And that's why I wrote the second book. But for me, it was it's far more about, I believe that systems work for introverts, but I also believe that we as introverts get in our own way because we believe we can't. And so there needed to be books that not just hold strategies, but actually applied showed real stories of real introverts that were perhaps a little bit harder up than the people reading it, and help them see that if they can succeed, they can too.
That's amazing. I appreciate that you put these resources out into the world and people can see themselves in it. I think that's the difference, is that a lot of times it is written purely networking books. I did a thorough research on networking books before I wrote my first book back, which is now almost 8 years ago or something. But it, a lot of it is about sort of like work harder, hustle. And I'm like, I didn't want that either. Right. I'm like, there's nuances, there are strategies, there's like small moments. And I think I attract a lot of people who identify as shy and or introverted because the way I talk about relationship building as my method of networking, attraction-based marketing as my method of marketing, and sales is about being of service, right? So that these are all things that I think they're sort of values that align a lot with the community you're talking about. But
Absolutely.
I don't want to be in a room full of loud, obnoxious extroverts either. So it's like, like even though I can be one, I've had to really work to not be that person. As a leadership skill, it's about making space, having that responsibility. So as we're getting towards the end of here, I want to make sure I ask you specifically how you sort of network now or stay in touch. You have a massive network, a global network. And they're the people you're going to stay in touch with. You put a lot of effort into that. But then there's always the folks that are like your second and third layer or second and third tier out. People you see at a conference once a year. People that you worked with 5 years ago, but you don't have a reason to right now. You like each other. That is the base. You enjoy each other's company. So how do you think about nurturing those kinds of looser connections? Any habits, philosophies, practices?
Yeah, absolutely. So there are a couple of answers to that. So firstly, I always put all relationships into three boxes. And by the way, for the people that are networking, that going to face-to-face networking. Oh, and by the way, Robbie, I should say I reference your book a ton. Like your conceptuality about the way people are standing and your way to enter conversations, really, really helpful, especially for a lot of introverts where they don't know what groups to walk up to. I think that for a lot of people, they feel like they're going networking to find prospects. And I think that also feels transactional, especially for somebody that's going into a dialogue trying to be more genuine. So the thing that I am constantly highlighting is you need to put people into three buckets. The first bucket is prospects. And yes, there is a whole bunch of methodical processes for following up. I tend to find that if you go into a networking room to meet prospects, or if you run into a prospect, and by the way, if you're not researching who you're speaking to before you go into a room, right, you're making it much harder than you need to. Like one of the things I say is I'll always find who's going, whether it's a Facebook page of people that went last week or last month, a meetup group with all the LinkedIn profiles, a events app that has I go profile shopping. I literally will find the people I want to talk to, connect with them in advance. Who cares if they're not going? Starts a dialogue, right? I connect. Are you going to the event? I'm really passionate about meeting, blah, 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 right? So by doing that, you end up with all these Zoom calls with people that aren't going this month. But for me, when I go to a networking room, it feels like a bunch of pre-planned meetings. So for me, I'm not going to walk up to that person selling insurance. I'm going to walk up to that person that I know is a great fit and great candidate for what I do, or fits into one of these other two boxes, which is momentum partners or champions. Now, for the people that are prospects, usually it ends with the dialogue where they ask me I tell them a story. I utilize passion, mission, and story. There's a framework that I talk about in the book, and I wish we had time to cover it because I don't hold back usually. The process that I follow literally leads them to say, oh my gosh, I need what Wendy has. What would that look like? And I'm like, look, I appreciate you asking. Now's not really a great time for that, though. We're all out networking, and I'd love to understand more about you. We all have our phones in front of us, though, right? So why don't we just schedule a call so we can have a follow-up conversation? Or if they don't say that, then I say, hey, I've got some great resources. If you like, I'll send them to you. And that then leads to a more automated process for follow-up. There are other two groups of what I would call more white glove hand-holding. So there would be groups which I would call momentum partners. Now, a momentum partner is somebody that believes in your work and shares the word of your work, introduces you and open doors for you. And you do the same for them because they believe in it. Now, if they're transactional people, they just take. But if they're givers and you're givers, great relationships. You can go back 10, like Robbie, you reached out, you would be definitely in my momentum partner bucket, right? So for you, I mean, we haven't spoken in years. You reached out and said, can you be in my podcast? I'm booked out for like 5 months in advance. And I was like, just figure it out, set it up, right? Because anyone that's in your momentum partner box, you just make it work. And then you have your group of champions, where your group of champions, truthfully, the people like Ivan Meisner, who I'm honored to say is a friend, people that literally they would never ask me to do this. And I have wonderful relationships with these people. But truthfully, if they call me and said, can you pick up my dry cleaning? I would do it. So the thing that I want you to know is this group of champions all you need to do is understand that stop being a groupie, stop trying to sell them things, and stop trying, but be generally interested in them and want to give back to them, and just check in with them, asking for nothing. Trust me, these people got where they are because they see opportunities. They will find one for you without you telling them what the opportunity you're looking for is. So what I find is the group of momentum partners, I tend to have a shorter group of those that I speak to, and I, once a month, it just prompts on my phone, have I contacted them? And I have them under MP, as in momentum partner, and their name, right? So I'm always checking in with them. And then my group of my group of white glove champions, I always have a 6 monthly reminder, because you can't contact them all the time. And I just, check in with them, send them a message, let them know I'm thinking about them, send them a resource, but stay in contact with them. And my team now, because unfortunately I've got to the point, or fortunately, I'm not sure how you look at it, I've got to a point where I can't do everything. My network is too big to manage it on my own. So my team serves me up. You need to contact this person, or you need to do this, or you need to do that. And it gets scheduled for me. But when you start, you don't have a large number of people like that. So just focus on setting yourself reminders to focus on calling your momentum partners, but know where you go for those, and keep a comment on which person you contacted and when, and do the same with champions. Even if it's an Excel spreadsheet, take the person from the top, call them, do what you need to do, put them at the bottom, then continue.
I love the term momentum partners, and I think it's going to be the title of this episode because it's so good. It makes me go, what is that? You're like, hear that. You're like, I think I know what that is. I want to know more. It's a great term. And I also, that piece you just ended with around how do you keep track? I always say use whatever system you'll actually use. And I always joked that it could just be a stack of index cards that you just like take the action and put them in the bottom. And then I end up having someone on my show who does use index cards to keep track. But I recently started using, like a year and a half ago, Less Annoying CRM, which is just my favorite name for a CRM. And it's $15 a month for a user. And I'm like, that's an inexpensive way to test out whether you'll actually use a CRM. But I love the pipelines, so I can track whether I've taken certain actions with certain people. It's my brain could not continue to hold all the information. Like you said, I needed a team, I needed technology. We're about to wrap up. Before we get to my favorite wrap-up question, we're going to have a quick pause for a word from our sponsor. All right, favorite wrap-up question. I'm not going to wait 5 more years to have a deep conversation with you. So Matthew, when it's a year from now and I'm like, wow, it's been a year since we had this interview, I'm going to ask you, what are you celebrating? So what do you look forward ahead? What are you most looking forward to celebrating? What are you most looking forward to experiencing in the next year?
Great question. So for me, I actually have a new book coming out, or a new book that we're negotiating. We're actually negotiating 3 new books with my publisher at the moment. And it's going to be, so we're talking the next 7 years of my life. But I'm really looking forward. I don't want to give a ton of it away, but I built this new method, and I call it my invisible sales method. But the reason I call it that is because I believe the true definition of sales is to serve. And the best way to serve your clients is to get them out of their own way. Duty of care, as long as your product or service actually helps the client. Otherwise, don't ever buy my stuff. I don't want to help you. But if your product or service genuinely puts somebody in a better place, then the best way to serve your clients is to get them out of their own way. And that's why I invented this method. I believe that during COVID, people's buyer behavior changed. They expect people to become more researched. They expect people to be prepared. And truthfully, they expect the sales conversation to last 30 minutes. Great thing for us introverts, they actually don't want small talk at the beginning. They want to get straight to the point, but they want it to be done in a very specific and certain way. So I have an online course, and I've been teaching this for corporations now. It's drastically increasing sales closure rates and shortening sales cycles. And the invisible sales method is, available on Introvert Use platform, but I'm now putting that into a book, which I'm excited about. And then, of course, there's going to be a second edition of the Introvert's Edge, and the third one, super excited about. But I'm going to keep that one secret for now.
I was like on the edge of my seat. Matthew, I'm so excited for all that you're about to create and share with the world, and I can't wait to help you make that happen and celebrate that with you. I don't know if you've heard, but I just founded the Biz Book Publishing Hub, which connects entrepreneurs to experts that help them navigate the complexities of writing, editing, publishing, and marketing a business book. bizbookpublishinghub.com. And we have networking events for writers and authors every other month. So you can come hang out with a bunch of other fellow authors. As we wrap up here, how can people find you and follow your work?
Absolutely. Well, firstly, thanks for sharing that. I'll definitely check it out. truthfully, for the people that are listening, they would probably love to check out for those introverts especially. My publisher hates me when I say this. You don't need to buy my books. Just go to theintrovertsedge.com and download the first chapter of the sales book. Like there, if you just grab the chapter headings, put what you currently say into it, you'll realize some things don't fit. Throw that out. You shouldn't be saying it to customers. Then you should fill in the gaps and put things in order. If you just do that, you'll double your sales in the next 60 days. And it will convince you that you make an amazing salesperson as an introvert. So if you go to theintrovertsedge.com, you can do that. If you're more of a networker or you want to learn to network, go to the Introvert's Edge to networking, and we'll do the exact same thing for you. And then definitely, check out the Introvert's Edge podcast. I think you'll find it for those introverts that believe that they can't. The people that share their unique journeys will provide overwhelming evidence that you are providing yourself excuses that are just not accurate.